up, everybody? Shouts to MenzLeague for this chance to speak. Um, so I was asked to get vulnerable and to bring something forward in that way. And when I think about vulnerability, for me, I think about my journey with my own ego, my journey with what I call my inner critic. Um, Basically, the ways in which I've been wrong, but defended it, over the years. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So I've got some notes I'll be glancing down, but the idea basically is this inner critic, this inner ego, that I sort of nurtured from a young age. And when I remember back, this would be like my defensiveness, need to be right, righteous indignation about somebody else, doing something wrong or getting away with something, blaming others. When I either didn't get what I wanted or could see that somebody else had done something to me. And, the one in me who always watches and points out when something isn't fair that's being done to me or for someone else, but not for me. It's like the right to be right or be wrong, like defending my right to be right or be wronged. And this, led to, I'm just going to go through the story about it and then talk about how I've learned to deal with this part. It led to a split with my father. He died a year and a half ago. We had a relationship, my whole adult life, but it really fractured when I was 14. And in a weird way, in retrospect, looking back, I can see how he had like the same sort of ego, but in his own way. And when his sort of collided with mine, and I was not going to be sort of broken by his, and that was in a way like my downloading of it and embodying it. But then at a certain point, I don't get to blame him anymore. I have to kind of take responsibility. But that didn't come for many years, and this continued on into college, in social circles, feeling defensive. It continued into the work world where my sort of righteous or defensiveness or, just kind of like what maybe feels at times like hyper rational, but it's got some emotion behind it, is just like I would get myself into trouble by sort of, almost getting fired from a number of jobs because of, this like sort of emotional, critical, analytical need to defend myself or to defend something, right? And, I left the corporate world in my mid-20s and wound up, living alone in my mid-20s and arriving at this place where, and this is all, sort of private. Like I'm not, sharing this experience as I'm going because I'm not experiencing it at that time in a good way. I'm not experiencing it as anything other than just the way I see the world. And maybe at times admitting to myself, gosh, this isn't going well, or that didn't go well, or why do things always happen that way? But the pattern hasn't really emerged yet. And still living in it, I arrive in my 20s, kind of realizing, wow, okay, I'm about to turn 30, and there's some pieces in me that are really running the way I am in the world. And on a results basis, I can't seem to figure out how to show up in a way that helps me get more of what I want. Help me show up in a way that feels more easeful and flowing. And, I had nobody left to blame, nobody left to defend against. It was a little bit like, sort of waiting by the phone for a number of years there in my late 20s, early 30s, and there's no one calling. It's almost like no one cares anymore. And I'm not, and the way that I had trained myself to think that the world was responsible for whatever problems I had, I also sort of had the belief that the world was responsible for any blessings that I was going to receive or any sort of gain that I would make, and that would just come to me as well. And, this proved to be kind of a rude awakening. And so then I started to make these realizations. Well, I want to say that I had the help of a mentor, and he helped me make these realizations. And what I realized was this way of being, this critical, defensive, righteous, defending my own right to be a victim, defending my own right to be right, defending my right to be wronged by the world, not bringing me closer to my path, my purpose, or my passions. it only serves to kind of try to edit reality. Like I'm kind of at this place addicted to control, instead of owning my wants and desires, right? So when I'm in a situation I don't like, instead of just being clear about what I want, even if I can't have it, or living in the ache of something that I want but I don't have, I would sort of use the only lever at my disposal, which is to edit or criticize or cut down or say that's wrong, as if I could carve like newness or growth out of what already was, which really doesn't work, because oftentimes that's just, fear and control masquerading as some kind of directive. And it's a gnarly place to live in, and it's a gnarly place to be in relationship with. And of course, because of this, I'm kind of caught in this shame and blame loop, right? And I can't see any other way to be, because I'm in it, where I'm blaming others sort of energetically, subconsciously, for my life. But then I'm shaming myself for not having it, blaming myself and criticizing myself. What's wrong with you? You should have been able to get this. Oh, look, nothing good ever happens. You really are a loser. Starting to believe these thoughts, and realizing like, wow, this critic isn't just a voice that comes to sort of like, plague like an artist who's sitting there, and a writer having writer's block. Like, this critic is really, the way I'm referring to him, is just like the whole defensive slash controlling slash fear-based ego part that drops in to try to deal with pain in a way that ends up causing more pain. And another thing I would do is I would just never stick to anything, right? I would start things and then I would shelve them, and I would never, because nothing was ever good enough. Like, oh, that's not the right thing. That's not the thing that's good enough. Like, oh, that had some promise, but I realized after looking at it, it's not really the thing. And so nothing ever has a thing, which then causes me to go back in and shame myself even more. And so just sort of living inside this pervasive, sort of like all controlling, fear masquerading as critical editing of reality and pointing out what's wrong, and feeling victimized all the time and being like, well, that's just the way reality is. And so my mentor helped me realize that this critic was actually trying to protect something, right? He was protecting this inner little boy of mine, right? Because when I really dropped in and could feel the sense of an inner child, of a little boy, I would realize, oh, wow, he's innocent. He knows pleasure. He's intuitively knowing about what feels right and is good. He has instinct, he has passion. He's really just perfect. And all of that is hidden behind this learned, like I've explained, this learned ego. And so I began the journey to kind of work with this part, right? And the last thing I want to say about this part real quick is that when we have this tendency and this part, and we're bringing this into the world, it's not good enough after a while to just keep apologizing for it. Because what happens is people get sick of getting apologized to, and they just don't want to deal with you or me, right? Like, they didn't want to deal with me anymore. They're just like, okay, I saw that side of you. I'm good. And so what I realized is I actually have limited goodwill with people, and I actually have to not live in a world where I can just be a jerk and then apologize, but actually not be a jerk and learn how to shift how I show up. And I did that through two main components. So the first thing I had to do is I had to learn, and I'm still learning all the time, having a family, living in community, having a business, how to check my own defensiveness, my ego, my victim, my defender of my right to be right or to be a victim. I had to learn, and I tell this funny story, this is a little bit vulnerable, but living here with my partner here in Western Colorado, and we had some kind of a thing where I was chasing, or I was going to take the recycling out, and as I was going out, we just got into a little bit of a fight, and I went to put the recycling in the car, and it spilled, and cans are blowing because it's windy. Cans are blowing along the yard, and I'm walking around the yard, picking everything up, and as I'm going, I'm having an imaginary conversation with her that is from this part, like, well, you never did this, and if you really knew this, or God, I can't believe you would do that. And, oh, what do you expect from me? And going through this whole sort of argument with this person, and I come back to the car, and as I come back to the car, I go by the front door, and it's open, and she's standing there behind the screen door, and she says, "Don't ever talk to me that way again." And I said, "Oh my God, I am so sorry." I said, "You're right. I never would bring that voice to you. The old me would have. The old me would have talked to you that way. You overheard me bitching to myself, and I would do that privately, but I'll never bring that to you. And that's the truth, is that we have to stand between this defensive, this victim, this tantrum throwing little boy. We have to stand between that person and the people we love. And if I were bringing that to her in that way, she'd have every right to say to me, don't ever talk to me that way. But once she realized that I wasn't talking to her, that I was actually just sort of airing it out with myself, then she softened, because I am committed to not bringing that to people that I love. It doesn't mean that it doesn't pop out sometimes. It doesn't mean that it doesn't get away from me. But my commitment is to always, and this is that first point, is to always come back and say, I got caught. I was in my critic. I am going to go away for a minute, 5 minutes, collect myself. I'm going to take my argumentativeness, my defensiveness out of the room, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to bring the loving, generative parts of me. And then that second part of this journey for me has been to commit to the healing and the re-raising and the healing and the peace and the pleasure of my little boy, to kind of re-raise him. And I don't let anybody mess with him. That means that I can occur in the world and want something or experience something, or let my joy come out. And if somebody makes fun of me or messes with me like they would have, I wouldn't then let the critic come in and protect him and say, oh, fuck you and this and that and how dare you and whatever. That's the old Peter. Now I actually say, okay, maybe this isn't the right place for me to go, but there's no way I let people take from me my experience of innocence and joy and vitality and aliveness, because I, on the one hand, own my critic when it does come out, and when people then give me, come at me on the other side, I have done the work I'm doing the work and continue to do the work to allow myself to experience and embody my innocence and my pleasure and my intuitive passion and play. And so sometimes you just have to walk away from certain situations, but I don't let them define my behavior, like I did all through my upbringing. Everything that happened to me, every time I was in a fight or victimized or whatever, it was like that situation would then trick me or catch me, trap me, and then I would be reactive. And all the behavior that issues forth from there, I'm not really in control of, because I'm just sort of, triggered and throwing a tantrum and waiting for someone to rescue me. So now I rescue myself. And I just want to say lastly, this key to vulnerability, to be able to be vulnerable, which is one of the real passions of MenzLeague and the platform and the pillars of MenzLeague, is being able to look at our shadow parts and saying, yep, that is me. Not always, but that is me from time to time. And that's something that I got to own. And then moving closer to our dream by bringing the best that we do have to the table. It might not be to completely solve the problem. It might not be to be able to fix the pain, but to be able to say, well, I've got some of it, and that's what I'm going to bring forward. And then I'm going to let the sort of jagged edge of my experience where I don't have control be okay. I'm not going to let my sort of OCD manic need to have reality conform to this really childish emotional need to have everything be perfect run me. I'm going to accept some vulnerability. I'm going to accept some lack of control. I'm going to surrender and bring the best that I have, and then hope that I get a little help from the universe and a little help from my friends. And so that's really the idea, is that we as men, we're responsible for our consciousness. We're responsible for our behavior. We're responsible for not what happened to us, but who we are and who we've become because of what's happened to us. We can't change what's happened, but we can change who we are and what we've brought into the world, and whether we're, have a very strong ego or a strong warrior part or a lot of anger. Like, that's our responsibility to deal with that. The buck has to stop with us, and recognizing that and hosting that while being able to re-engage and heal our inner child and our sweet, vulnerable, beautiful innocence and perfection that's behind that. That is standing in the column of our masculine. That is masculine radiance. And that's our healing. So right in under 15, hope some folks stayed for it. Thanks so much again for the opportunity to speak to y'all. Love to hear your thoughts, how this occurs for you. And so have a great day. Take care.